Hello everyone, I'm Anne-Marie.
And I'm Gabe. Have you ever struck up a conversation with someone you don't know? Have you had a conversation with a coworker or classmate in passing? Or maybe you've attended a party and mingled with friends and acquaintances?
All of these situations require you to know how to make small talk. It can be hard to do, especially in your second language, but it is a skill that can be learned.
And that's why in this video, we're going to share tips with you on how to improve your small talk in English.
And a great place to start when making small talk is by starting a relevant conversation.
Being relevant means that something is connected to the matter at hand. It's not random.
Relevant conversation is conversation that has to do with what the person is currently doing, what they themselves like, and your relationship to them.
Let's look at these three categories one by one. Small talk related to what the person is currently doing depends on the setting. Let's say a coffee shop.
If you're in line and want to strike up a conversation with the person in front of you, you could make a comment on what they ordered. Hey, that's one of my favorite drinks. Or, do you always take your coffee black?
Now, this type of conversation might be more or less common depending on where you live in the world. Just make sure that the setting is appropriate before you start these kinds of conversations.
Okay, let's talk about making sure the conversation is relevant to what you know someone likes. This kind of small talk is done with someone you already know and have a relationship with.
If you know your coworker is into politics, you might ask them their opinion on a news story that you saw. Hey, did you see that news story? What did you think of it?
Or if a classmate's favorite author releases a new book, you could ask them if they've read it. Clearly, you need to know the person fairly well to ask these kinds of questions.
Lastly, when starting relevant conversations, you have to choose your opening question and topic based on your relationship with that person.
For example, you wouldn't ask a random stranger, "What did you do last weekend?" That's weird. But this question would be perfectly fine for making small talk with your coworker that you haven't seen all weekend.
Are the conversations you're making relevant, friends? It can take practice, but by doing this, you can really improve your small talk in English.
Now, when engaging in small talk, it's important to listen to what the other person is saying and respond appropriately. But Gabe, have you ever been in a conversation before and it feels like an interrogation?
Yes, I have. That can be intense. I think this happens a lot with English learners. Maybe you've done this. You memorize a list of questions, and then when you see a foreigner, you ask them all the questions you can remember one after the other.
Sound familiar? The problem with this is that it often makes people feel uncomfortable and that you aren't willing to be open with them.
That's right. You have to be willing to share about yourself too. Conversations are give and take.
And being willing to share about your own life will make this conversation flow much better. So, what does this look like?
Well, let's say you're talking to someone and you ask how their vacation went. They tell you that they went to Europe and that they especially enjoyed Rome. After hearing through to the end of what they want to tell you, it's your turn to share.
If you've been to Europe, say that and explain what your favorite part was. Don't just say, "Oh, I see." If you haven't been to Europe, tell them about the last time you took a vacation and what it was like.
This rule of being willing to share doesn't just apply to small talk. This is also good general advice for making friends with people from different cultures. In order to make a friend, you need to be open.
Okay, let's say you want to be open, but you're just a beginner and don't even know where to start. That's when you need to practice this next tip: practicing fake conversations.
Wait, fake conversations? Why would anyone want to do that?
It might sound crazy at first, but hear me out. This is something I used to do myself when I was learning Chinese.
Okay, so how does it work?
So what I would do is think of a situation I might encounter later that day or week. Maybe I was going to the market or the bank. I would think of all the phrases I might need to tell them so they understood what I wanted.
Okay, that does sound helpful. But how does that help the whole conversation? You don't know how the other person is going to respond.
Well, a lot of times you can guess. This is where textbook conversation practice comes in handy. If your English textbook has sample conversations, practice them. And not just your part. Practice both sides of the conversation.
Now that makes sense. And you could also think through other answers that the other person might give to your questions, like an alternative conversation.
Exactly. So basically what this does is it prepares your brain for potential conversations you might have. You're ready with an answer when you hear certain phrases.
An important thing to note is that this needs to be done out loud. You have to practice all the lines verbally for it to really work.
Now, of course, this method isn't foolproof. Sometimes someone says something totally different than what you were expecting. I remember when I first arrived on the island, I practiced my food order and I even practiced saying, "Why dai?" But when I actually ordered, the phrase they said to me was, "Daizo ma." I was totally lost.
But you never forgot that phrase, did you?
Nope. I'll always remember that situation because it was real life conversation, and my brain attaches those words to that memory.
Well, try it out, friends. Practice the conversations you need to have ahead of time so that when you have them, you'll be ready for them.
And now, friends, it's time to talk about one of the most difficult things to do when it comes to small talk in a foreign language. Pay attention to cultural and social cues. First, let's talk about what a cue is.
Well, a cue is a word or an action used to signal someone else. In conversation, there are several types of cues you need to watch out for.
So let's look at two of them today. The first type is a social cue. As you are making small talk with someone, no matter what language it's in, there are signals that tell you how they are feeling.
This can be as basic as their facial expressions and body language. Is their face happy or angry? Are they relaxed or do they seem uncomfortable?
If you're talking to someone and they are constantly checking the time and not looking you in the eye, it could be a social cue that they are in a hurry and need to go.
Social cues are easier to read than cultural ones. Now, to pick up on cultural cues, you need to have a basic understanding of your target language's culture.
For example, the type of questions that are appropriate to ask a Westerner could be different than the ones you ask your friends at home.
Topics and questions to avoid include weight loss or weight gain, rents and salary, and family planning. These are just a few you might want to avoid. Do your research ahead of time, then follow the rule that you shouldn't ask any question where you aren't willing to provide your answer first.
A big part of this is watching people carefully to see how they are responding to the topics you pick and the questions you ask.
Picking up on social and cultural cues can take trial and error. You're going to make mistakes, but watching facial expressions and hearing people's answers will help you figure this out over time.
Don't be discouraged. If you make a mistake and someone seems uncomfortable with your choice of topic or the question you ask, just apologize and change the subject.
With practice, you'll get the hang of it. We do hope that the tips we shared with you today help you improve your small talk in English.
If you did find this video helpful, please make sure that you like and subscribe. We'll see you next time for more tips on how you can improve your English.
See ya.